Hey everybody, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio. And a big thank you for all the great comments we've been getting lately for the most recent shows, including that little survey. And if you haven't participated yet, please do, as to whether or not you'd rather see a Rubber Soul release at the end of the year or a Beatles anthology release. None of us knows for sure. I know I get a lot of people telling me it's definitely going to be the anthology. I don't think anyone really knows. But I'd love to know your comments about that. What would matter more to you, Rubber Soul or the Beatles anthology? You know, at the end of the year, there's always some Beatles product coming out. We can always count on that. So, which of the two would you prefer to see coming out? And I also want to thank you for all the people who wrote in for the last show that we did with the Things We Said Today reunion with our Beatles Preferences show. And hopefully, we'll be doing more of those in the future on my channel. As always, we always talk Beatles here, and Owen Lynn is back with us. He's been a frequent guest to my channel here, most recently with Daryl Easley. And Daryl is the editor on the specialized versions of Record Collector magazine. Back in December of 2023, they put out this issue, which you have there too, Owen. And also December of 2024, one on John and Yoko. Very thorough issues, I might add,
Hmm.
covering the full discography and the solo careers of Paul and John and Yoko. And as I
Hmm.
said in my show with Daryl and Owen, they even covered Julian and Sean in that issue. And
Hmm.
in that episode we just had, Daryl revealed that at the end of this year there'll be a new one on George Harrison, which I'm looking forward to. But we brought Owen back because in the Paul McCartney issue, he did a review of Paul's new album
Hmm.
released in 2013. And I said to him, we'll have you on to talk about your article. A year and a half since, I don't know. These things take time. Time takes time. Anyway, so Owen, welcome back to my channel.
It's very kind to be here. Yeah, and the last time I was on the show, I said I was just about to get on a flight to Cannes. I went to the film festival,
Yeah.
and that's why I think I've got this hairstyle because I want to look like Louis XIV.
It's very effective. Yeah,
So
you
thank
could
you.
star in one of those movies.
Uh, the people, they should honor me.
That was convincing to me. Hire this guy.
Okay.
All right. So before we talk about news, some background information about it. First of all, it was recorded from January of 2012 through March of 2013. It came out in October of 2013. What makes this album different, though not totally different from other McCartney albums, is that there are four producers that worked with
Hmm.
Paul on this album: Mark Ronson, Giles Martin, Paul Epworth, and Ethan Johns.
Hmm.
And kind of like Flowers in the Dirt had a lot of different engineers as well. But I know Owen gave a very positive review of the new album. And
Hmm.
sometimes, I need to clear up something with you, Owen, because I get the impression at times from our discussions that you kind of prefer when Paul goes back to his more natural sound, his more pure
Hmm.
sound that he's most familiar with, more of the 70s, like you would favor more of a McCartney 3, going back to something like that, than when
Hmm.
Paul would try to adventure into new territory, new production, like the new album or a Press to Play, for example, or a Driving Rain, or The
Hmm.
Fireman, for that example. But you
Hmm.
really embrace this album for what the producers bring to it, in part, as well as the musicianship and the songs. So,
Hmm.
are you more in favor of when Paul works with these new and younger producers who bring a new, fresh sound to his music, or would you rather that it's more a throwback to what he was most famous for?
Well, and I'm going to quote myself from the episode that you and I did with Dino and Beatletone. I would like to hear something I've never heard from McCartney before. So if it's a grand folly, then it's a grand folly. But at least it's something that I haven't heard. Or something like Flaming Pie, which is very much him trying to emulate. It's very much anthology forward, trying to emulate. Doesn't interest me as much. But on this occasion, I think yes, he chose really good producers. He had some very good songs, and I think it was a very good marriage. there's an interview McCartney gave where where he says, I mean, it's a lot of different styles, but I think it's. I mean, I was listening to the White Album, and that was one of the Beatles' better albums. And I don't know if I'd quite compare the new album to the White Album, but I mean, it is a very eclectic album, very different, and I think on this occasion the eclecticism actually worked really, really well, which it might not have done on, say, the Driving Rain album. But that's everyone has their personal tastes.
Right. One thing I noticed on the album, and we're going to stick to the album without going into the bonus tracks, which are
Hmm.
fascinating to me, but Paul Epworth, he actually
Hmm.
co-wrote three songs with Paul on this
Hmm.
album. Nobody ever
Yep.
brings that up. As far as collaborators with Paul, you've got Denny Lane, Eric Stewart, Elvis Costello.
Hmm.
But to write three songs with someone, it's certainly
Hmm.
worth bringing up here. Do you
Hmm.
see any difference in the songwriting, maybe the lyrics or anything in those songs where you can hear a contribution from Paul Epworth?
Well,
You,
certainly instrumentally, I mean, in terms of the drums and the beats, that's very much Epworth.
huh,
I think it may have been Paul being quite generous. It's like Paul awarding Ringo Starr a co-writing credit for "Really Love You." It may
uh-huh.
have been that like you had a helping hand, but really the songwriting was McCartney. It sounds to me like it was like how he worked with Youth, which is very much where he goes into the studio and Youth says, "Just don't think, just play," and then the songs will appear that way. So in that sense, maybe Epworth was a co-writer in that he was there when when the songs were being born as a sort of midwife.
Hmm. You think in the case of Youth, it was more what he brought as a producer, where he got a songwriting credit instead of the actual composition?
Well, I think definitely lyrically they're McCartney compositions. So maybe I would say in both Youth and Epworth, it's they helped with the music. But I mean, if it was David Bowie, he probably would have taken the co just the writing credits for himself. Tony Visconti regularly had a helping hand in birthing those Bowie tracks, and Eno, and I'm not sure, and Mick Ronson, and they very rarely got writing credits. So I think it's quite generous of Paul in this case to recognize their contributions.
Right.
I don't think it was like as it was with Eric Stewart or Denny Lane, where they had guitars and let's see what happens.
Okay. Oh, by the way, let me see if I can find it here. I apologize because you wrote an introduction for yourself, which I didn't say at the beginning here. And I think it's very important because for people that don't know your full background here, you're the author of George Harrison in the 1970s. You've also
Mhm.
contributed to Pop Matters, Record Collector, which is what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
Dirty Movies? Is there
Yes,
the other
they're
side of you that we don't know about, Owen?
that everyone makes that joke. It's a magazine I went to Cannes with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And there's Far Out and Culture Sonar. And it
Hmm.
says Lynn has a passion for the Beatles and considers them to be almost as good a band as Wings. You're
Someone's got to
saying
say
that
it.
to stir controversy. Come on.
No, me. I don't stir controversy.
Uh-huh. But didn't you
Uh,
say to me, as far as that's concerned, you were thinking more as a live band?
I also think a lot of the songs are. I think yeah, like the musicianship, I think is a step above in Wings than it was in the Beatles. I mean, Lennon was not the best guitar player in the world. Like, he was certainly not in the same level as Jimmy McCulloch.
Okay. So instead of going in that direction here, which could take us hours, hold off on the hate comments for Owen here. We'll do another show on this altogether. But there's a part of me that no matter what has to respect what my guests have to say. That's the professional side of me, whether I agree with them or not. But we're
Yes.
going to talk now about new. But
Mhm.
I want to just read because I love the way you start off this article. One particular thing I need to question you about, if you don't mind my reading word for word the first paragraph here.
That's fine.
Considering the identity crisis Paul McCartney suffered following the breakup of the Beatles, his solo career has for the most part been remarkably sure of itself. He spent
Mhm.
the 1970s touring the globe, cemented by a song selection that was infectious and incredibly easy to dance to. It's more to it than
Mhm.
dancing, I think, but he spent
Sure.
The 1980s, he spent the 1980s largely in the studio, fine-tuning his arrangements to fit the contradictions in his voice. And then in the 1990s, he flitted between commercial and classical, impressing both the critics and his musical peers with his inexhaustible work ethic. What did you mean by contradictions in his voice in the
Well,
19?
like well, like I mean, there's him as a father, there's him as a rocker, there's him as a pop star. There's many malleable elements to him that I think, like on the Tug of War album, which, as we both know, is my favorite McCartney album. It's such a chameleonic album.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I mean, it opens up with this wonderful ballad, that Tug of the title track, uh, which I suspect is him circumnavigating his career. It has more playful tracks like Ebony and Ivory and Dress Me Up Like a Robber, and then it also has a very tender track with Here Today, and he's showing like very different sides of his voice. That I think on an album like Band on the Run, it's much more pop rock and directed that way.
So he's showing more versatility in his voice, is what you're saying.
Oh, big time. I mean,
Okay.
Somebody Who Cares. I mean, there's a very tender side to that we haven't heard, I think, since probably since the White Album.
Okay. I just
Mm-hmm.
had a problem with the word contradictions there and how it was used.
Okay,
I'm sorry. That's why I'm asking you.
that's all
Uh,
right.
and then I just want to read the next paragraph, and then I won't just read your entire article here, I promise. Which brings which brings us to the 21st century and a decade in which he started as a knight and a widower. His
Hmm.
music, which tended to reflect the decades they were created in, was becoming more personal. And by chaos and creation in the backyard, he was confessing to his foibles and misgivings. By the time he released New, McCartney wasn't just reminiscing about the past, but archiving it for future generations to enjoy. That's really well written. And I think a lot of people love
Thank
the
you.
fact that chaos and creation is so revealing about himself, deeply personal
Hmm.
songs there. And you can find that in most of his albums, whether it's one song or several. But
Hmm.
here, when you're talking about, well, obviously with something like Tug of War or the songs we were singing, he's talking about John there, although he never
Hmm.
admitted that with the songs he was singing. But
No.
here he's got early days.
Yes.
And so, wonderful lyrics in that song. It's one of
Hmm.
my favorite songs on the album. And
Okay.
he doesn't mind bringing up the past. And it is a sort of a controversial song in a way because from what I understand, the way that Paul explained it, he was talking to a very young girl who was a Beatle fan who talked to him about something that happened in his past. And Paul said to her, "No, you got it all wrong. It happened like
Mm.
this." And then she was trying to correct him
Yeah.
as you seem to think, and some people have conjectured that this might have been targeted towards Mark Lewison or
Hmm.
people who think they know more about the Beatles than he does.
Yes. I yes. Yes. Well, that was something Daryl Easley and I discussed when it was proposed to me that I would write this piece. We sent some ideas back and forth, and that was one of the things that we both felt had to be brought up in the piece. That I mean, this album came out about a week or two. It was released in conjunction with Tune In. There was very and McCartney was well aware that book was on the horizon, having collaborated a small to a certain degree. I mean, Lewison emailed him some questions, which he answered. He didn't answer all of them, but he did answer some questions. So he did play a small part in the book.
Hmm. Do you personally think that it was directed towards Mark?
I think it's just more that he was just fed up of everyone telling him what he could or couldn't do. There's also the stories that in 2010, 2011, he's performing Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, and people were like, "You can't play that. That's a John Lennon number." And it's like, I mean, John Lennon sang "I Saw Her Standing There." I mean, what rule is this? And if anyone's entitled to play a John Lennon song, surely it's his co-writer.
Hmm. You mean John saying I saw her standing there with Elton John?
Yeah, yeah. But like, I mean, it's not a case of like John Lennon never sang Paul McCartney tracks. Of course he did. And then we seem to get back to they're singing each other's songs. And I mean, Lennon sang "No Reply," which is a Paul McCartney song. I mean, if anyone's entitled to sing the other person's songs, it was then.
I never heard No Reply was a McCartney song. John talked about it, as though it was influenced by Silhouettes by the Rays.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
John
remember.
John openly talked about No Reply as being
Oh,
his.
not no reply. What's every little thing? That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, yeah,
Mhm.
that's true. Paul said that was his song.
And
So,
it's mostly sung by John. I know you did a
right.
Robert Rodriguez did a very good episode with two guys, and they say that Paul is more prominent than people believe. But when I listen to every little thing, it's really Lennon belting that track.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of people that are very suspicious of Paul when he gives himself credit for things that most people hadn't been aware of. And, like he said, he's written a few words for Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. He has said
Mm-hmm.
that. And he also said that he and John picked some of the words off the poster, the circus poster, for being for the benefit of Mr. Kite. And to
Mm-hmm.
anyone that challenges that, how can you compete with someone who was there?
Yeah,
What
exactly.
happened, Um,
Yes.
Paul's not saying
Also,
I wrote the whole song. He'll just say,
mhm,
a few words from Lucy in the Sky, for example.
of course. And plus, I think Paul McCartney is entitled to play any songs written by John Lennon or George Harrison. I mean, he's keeping the flame alive. I mean, I don't see what the big problem is.
Neither do I.
Hmm.
It's a
Yeah.
tribute in a way when he does that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Hmm.
Do you hear between those four producers a consistency in the sound, or you just pointed out Paul Epworth about the drum sound, which is very noticeable in something like Queenie Eye.
Hmm.
Drums are
Yeah.
fantastic in Queenie Eye.
It's a
Um,
fantastic song. Yeah.
Do you hear a difference between the four producers? Because the one of the things I love about New is that I really can't tell, although you point out the drum sound with Paul Epworth,
Hmm.
which guy is producing each track.
Hmm. I think the one that probably sounds that there isn't the same tattoo or trademarks on is Giles Martin's tracks. I don't think he's like his father. He didn't have like a trademark sound that he just brought out the best out of the track.
Hmm.
When I interviewed Hamish Stewart, Stewart said George Martin was a producer's producer and that he just heard a track and just knew how to embellish it. So like, how does he get America? He worked with America. They
Mm.
didn't sound like the Beatles. He works with Peter Sellers. They sound. He knew how to get the comedy. Like he just knew how to. He hears a song. He say, okay, how do I make this the song? Whereas a producer like Phil Spector would have made it his own song.
Okay. Yeah. So, but I mean, in terms of the whole feel of it, I still feel like all the songs could have been done by one person, and that's a compliment to the album in and of itself.
I think, yeah, I, I think it's more noticeable on the Flowers and the Dirt album. It's very clear which one are Lipton and Horn and which one are other people. And yeah, I think there it's much more noticeable who produced what.
Okay. Let me question you on this one sentence you started one paragraph with. The lyrics induce mood aplenty, offering a rare and frank reflection into the fractured psyche.
Mm-hmm.
What point did you pick up a fractured psyche in Paul's songs?
Well, I mean, and this song, I mean, I mean, the fact that the third verse is now some people tell me, and or I can't
Mhm.
remember the lyrics, but there's a bit of finger wagging there, showing a vulnerability because for decades he tried to make it seem like that he was this swaggery kind of leather jacket wearing, two thumbs up. When he was arrested in Japan, he responded by two thumbs up and oh yeah, I'll be a good boy this time. Wink at the
Mhm.
camera and and on a song like this, we can see the vulnerability and the fragility. So it's a rare. I think it's songs like Tug of War or Early Days, we see the real McCartney. I mean, I think the closest thing we've come to seeing the real McCartney is in the McCartney Legacy books, which I've said in both in my recent review for Beatle Fan that what we see in McCartney Legacy isn't the musician or the mythology. We see the
Right.
man. Yeah, and it's a shame that McCartney doesn't show that side of him a bit more. That he seems a little guarded, certainly not in a way that John Lennon would have. Just John Lennon was happy to show every aspect of his life. Sometimes a bit too much of that. I mean, there's
Uh-huh.
lots of criticism. If for critics of Lennon, they could say, tone it back. Why do you? Could you? You don't have to be so overt. But it's also a shame that McCartney occasionally, even Denny Lane said, was quoted as saying that Paul McCartney, it's hard to get past that there is a guard there. That it's and if Denny Lane, a person who's played with him for 10 years,
Right.
couldn't get. I mean, I read somewhere that Denny Lane only found out about the death of Jim McCartney on a chat show. I mean, that's not great.
That's pretty amazing to think that Paul wouldn't share that with him,
Yeah,
like
it's just like Paul
immediately.
says, yeah, I know. I mean, it's like that's the first thing you do. I mean, I can imagine Danny Lane was incredibly hurt by that.
Hmm. Okay. And also with Early Days, which Ethan Johns produced, I remember there was a moment in there when Paul's voice was kind of rough and it cracked, and he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do it over, and Ethan said, "No, no, leave it in there. It shows your vulnerability." And I like
Brilliant.
the way his voice sounds on Early Days there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it is what it is—an old man reflecting on his life, and
Right.
I think this was the album where he started to accept he was an old man. Before that, I mean, okay, you could make an argument for Kisses on the Bottom, where he's going through his father's record collection, but as late as Memory Almost Full, still he's I still suspect there's a sort of a Peter Pan syndrome to him as late as Memory Almost Full, but by new he's accepting his age, and which is why we get by 2021 a beautiful, or 2020 a beautiful album by McCartney 3 with tracks like Women and Wives. I
Uh-huh.
mean, these wonderful, like, which reflect where he is in his late 70s, a grandfather effectively looking back on his on the pleasures and the failings of his life.
Yeah, well, his stuff has gotten more and more personal, which I think
Mm-hmm.
his fans are really embracing, you know.
Yeah,
It is true that, a good part of his life he's been very guarded, and you have to really search through the lyrics to find
yeah.
something personal. And there'll be some things
Mm-hmm.
in there, but he's not pouring out his heart,
No, he's not.
completely.
He's not Bruce Springsteen. He's not John Lennon.
Well, he is who he is. I love him
Yes.
exactly the way he is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just want to read because these are such great lyrics in early days. These are ones
Mm-hmm.
that stand out for me, like the pictures on the wall of the local record shop, hearing noises we were destined to remember. We
Mm-hmm.
willed the thrill to never stop.
Mm-hmm.
May sweet memories of friends from the past always come to you when you look for them, and your inspiration, long may it last, may it come to you time and time again. It's that's very Crosby, Stills, and Nash sounding to me,
It is.
as a folk song, and I
Mm-hmm.
love that aspect of that song.
It's a shame. When was his Blackbird book published? The ones where he had like lyrics and poetry. Was
I
that in
think that was
2001?
like around, I'm going to be probably off by this, around 2005 or so. I don't think it was that close in time. It's the first decade of the 2000s. He put that
Well, it's a
out.
shame because Early Days belongs in that poetry book because the lyrics are so. Because I think it is almost a poem.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a very good point right there.
Mm-hmm.
You also talk about the title track to New, and it's
Mm-hmm.
funny because what you had to say here is almost exactly what I felt as soon as I heard it for the first time. The title track, complete with a vocal melody pleasantly reminiscent of Penny Lane, complete with brass and a jocular, quintessentially English false ending. I love that
Mm-hmm.
ending, that a cappella ending, you know?
Yes. Yes. I love it too. Yes. Yeah. I discovered this album when I lived in Prague in 2017, and whenever I boarded a bus to go to other parts of Germany or Austria, they had that was one of the albums on display. So I listened to it and you're like, and then you think the song's over, and then ooh, ooh, it's a lovely little. It's almost also quite Wings-esque. It could feature on the London Town album.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wish when Paul performed the song live, he would do that little coda
Yes.
there, and he never did. That might have been really cool just to see the band members singing a cappella together,
Yes.
song that way.
Yes. It's always like there's a Brian Wilson number I quite like called Love and Mercy. And at one point it is just a cappella and it is just breathtaking. Then it
Right.
goes back to the song. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of Beach Boys-ish, that ending there.
Mm.
You say bridging the gap between the old and the new is Giles Martin. What in this album reminds you of the old? Well, new does, because it does sound like an old, you know, Paul Beatle song there, like Penny Lane or A Good Day Sunshine, kind of.
Uh, I Can Bet sounds like something from the Tug of War album. It's not far off. It's not far off Dress Me Up Like a Robber. It's very guitar heavy. His vocals like ascending. The instrumentation. It's got that kind of heavy beat like Led Zeppelin with Kashmir. It's got that sort of like 70s, 80s bam, bam, kind of
Uh-huh.
which whereas by the time 2013 everything seemed to be more minimalistic. Although now that I think about it, that was also the time of the AM album, the Arctic Monkeys album, an album I detest, which was all very drum heavy and beats. And but in
Okay.
2012 everything was very dressed down and very. So this is like a throwback to ornamentation and flourish. So I think that was something that reminded me of the old.
Hmm. Okay. Well, whenever I hear the whole new album, it sounds extremely contemporary. I don't really think anything has an old sound. I mean, the song new stylistically, compositionally, is very like,
Yes.
like I said, Paul with the Beatles. But production-wise, it all sounds like fairly new to me.
Another one, Save Us. That sounds like that's very much in the mold of, say, a piano rocker like 1984, 1985, or Lady Madonna. The kind of bam, 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 those kind of heavy-handed piano riffs.
Hmm. Okay. That's was it Save Us or was it Queenie Eye? One of them you said is the heaviest rocker he's done since Venus and Mars, was it? The
Yes.
okay. It's as loud as anything on the Venus and Mars album. Are you talking about? Oh,
Save
you,
Us.
you brought up Alligator too in this.
Yes.
Was it Alligator you're referring to or Save Us?
The Three and Save Us is one of two out and out rockers heard on the new track list. The
Okay.
first is loud. Well, the second. So the first one is Save Us, and the second one is Queenie Eye.
Hmm. Okay. Well, they're definitely very heavy rockers there, and I think a lot of fans who wish he'd rock more were very happy with those two songs. But tell me
100%. I
what?
was.
Yeah.
I mean, when Kisses on the Bottom came out, I was 17. Of course, I didn't want to listen to Kisses on the Bottom when I was 17. I admire it now, now that I'm in my 30s, and I like to drink wine and listen to that album. But what 17-year-old wants to listen to Kisses on the Bottom? I want the rock at that age.
I don't know. I was brought up on all those standards as a little kid, so it's, like breathing air to me. So,
Okay.
if my parents are listening to Frank Sinatra and Tony Bennett and Barbra Streisand and hearing standards from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, I can certainly take Paul doing it, even at an early age. But that's a whole other show altogether, Kisses on
Indeed.
the Bottom.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm very pleased overall because of not only do I like all the songs on it, I like
Mm-hmm.
you were talking about his versatility vocal wise. How do you feel? A lot of people will point to this as though it's Paul's voice getting weaker. But when you hear a song like Appreciate, it's all very filtered. It's a soft voice, it's a soft delivery, kind of like what he did on Kisses on the Bottom and what he's doing now with My Valentine with Barbra Streisand. That kind of thing, not a loud projecting voice. Or do you think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, he's experimenting with his voice, he's trying something different?
I think the latter. I'm not too crazy about Appreciate. It might be my least favorite track on the album.
Hmm.
I think it's got an idea of a song that doesn't really go anywhere.
Well, I kind of like it. I mean, all of his songs have a melody that is a great hook. And
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, Paul's vocals on Appreciate used to bother me. I don't
Mm-hmm.
like playing around so much with the voice. Is it a cover up or is it more what he feels is suitable for the song? And now I'm so used to Appreciate the way it is. I like it with that kind of a delivery for that song. But
Mm-hmm.
this whole album is loaded with a variety of styles, a variety of voices, a variety of sounds. It's
Mm-hmm.
very atmospheric,
Mm-hmm.
which is a word that you've used in the article here. And
Mm-hmm.
is it something that in your mind, because I brought up the other albums, which to me are the experimental McCartney albums, Press to
Mm-hmm.
Play, Driving Rain, even McCartney too, for that
Mm-hmm.
for that matter. Does this song to you scream the year it came out or you know, around that time, as some people seem to think Press to Play does? Or does it sound like it could have come out today?
I think it's slightly. I think Queenie Eye definitely has that kind of 2012, 2013 polish. But that's why I loved it because I heard it in 2012 and 2013 in a student bar in Cork, and I thought, yes, Paul's back.
Uh-huh.
Queenie Eye. Some of it. What's that song? I'll just get the song up now. Hosanna. Oh, Hosanna.
Was
Hosanna very much feels 2012-esque. It's very rustic and with slight tinges. It actually feels like something Nigel Godrich would have produced, ironically, because uh,
okay.
they did great work together in 2005. Uh, yeah, I think this. Well, everything dates. I mean, everything. The McCartney 3 album is a lockdown album. It doesn't. I have when I listen to McCartney 3, I have to remind myself when it was, assembled, and it was done when everyone had nothing else to do. So of
Uh-huh.
course McCartney is more introspective, and Press to Play is of its. I like a lot of Press to Play, but it's of its time. My favorite album of all time, Forever Changes My Love, is very screams 1967. It screams like late 60s
Uh-huh.
America.
You
Yeah.
know, the whole idea of an album being of its time is something that I personally don't relate to because there's never a time when I distance myself from any of this music.
Mm-hmm.
So, when people say this has an 80s sound, I'm always listening to 80s music and 60s
Yeah.
music and 70s music. So, it's not like I automatically just pin it down to that time period. But to me,
Yeah.
everything that's on new sounds like it could have been done today, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I
And
mean, I think there's a brilliant three-song run, Alligator, On My Day, Way to Work, and Queenie Eye. I think that's just three five-star tracks in a row.
uh-huh. What is it about Alligator that you like? Oh, let me quote this one line that grabbed me first more than anything else. Guitarist Brian Ray is the unsung hero of the record, littering pop numbers such as Alligator with staggeringly good fills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love
Oh,
the
it is
artwork on there.
it's wonderful. Yeah, I do know that Rusty also plays on that track, but there's a lot of great. Brian Ray does a lot of great guitar. He also plays baritone guitar on a couple of tracks, which gives it a smokier feel. And you also have to remember when I wrote this piece, there's a certain word count. So if it was a book I was writing, I would
Hmm.
flesh this point out a bit more. So, but yeah, Brian Ray plays a lot of great guitars on this album.
Yeah, I love the whole sound of the album.
Mhm,
Um, just reading some of the lyrics of Alligator.
mhm.
Everybody else is doing better than me, and I can see why it is. They got someone setting them free, someone breaking the chains, someone letting them be. What exactly is the
Yeah.
alligator setting him free? Is that a metaphor for
Well,
something?
don't think it's as deep as that. What's that lyric on Getting Closer? My
My
anaconda. Like, what does that
salamander.
even mean? My salamander. Yeah. What does that even mean? Does it have to mean anything? It's just a good. It's just a trippy lyric. What's that song Happy Together? I mean, they threw in that joke. And how is the weather? And then they spent the
Uh-huh.
rest of their lives being asked, why did you put in that lyric? It was a bit of a joke in the studio that just made it into that added something.
Uh-huh. Now you mentioned,
There's a very
yeah, the guitar playing that's towards the end of Alligator is fantastic. It's a dual
yeah.
guitar part. So,
Hmm.
like you said, whether it's all Brian Ray or Brian and Rusty, I don't know, but really helps to make the song.
Oh yeah. Like I feel a little sorry for the guys, even though Chaos and Creation I consider McCartney's finest of the 21st century. I do feel bad for the fact that the band were fired on the first day by Nigel Godrich. I mean,
They were.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, they McCartney brought the band in, and Godrich just pulled McCartney aside, and he said, "We're not making that kind of album. It's me and you." And McCartney says, "I blame Nigel a little bit, just a little bit, for firing the band."
Well, he brought them back to his credit, but I guess he
Yeah,
wanted the producer to have, you know, a strong say in the way the album was done.
I mean, critically, the the plaudits for Chaos and Creation were outstanding. Some of them saying it was the best album of his career.
It's one of them.
It's I thought it was his best work since Tug of War. I thought it was outstanding work.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I just said recently that Paul has made 10 or 11 albums that I consider truly great, and
Yes.
Chaos and Creation is one of them. And now,
Hmm.
I would put new in that category because I just find the songs to be so fresh and different,
Hmm.
production
Hmm.
wise, sometimes
Yep.
melodically where the songs go. A song like
Hmm.
Road is very different to me.
It is. It is very. And isn't there a hidden track at the end called "Scared"?
Yep, which is also, it's a
Yeah.
gorgeous tune.
Hmm.
It's just Paul and a piano for the most part, and it's very melodic and very personal.
Yes. I mean, yeah, no, I had a wonderful time writing this piece. Uh, this was one of the highlights of my career as a journalist. I would say these issues of Record Collector and the trips to Cannes are up there. Are like the It was just and I sent that first paragraph you read out very kindly. I sent it to Adrian Sinclair of McCartney Legacy, and he very kindly said to me, "You've summed up, you've nailed McCartney's history in that paragraph." I was like, "Well,
Uh-huh.
coming from you, Adrian, that's very kind of you."
Yeah. Um, it's just a fascinating thing to study someone with this kind of longevity, and everybody has
Hmm.
different impressions of musical periods. And,
Hmm.
I'm always championing the 80s for Paul.
Hmm.
Yes, I think it's a very underrated period between Tug of War, Press to Play, and Flowers
Hmm.
in the Dirt, and all the
Yeah.
stuff in the middle there with Phil Ramone, um, and David Foster. I think it was a very productive time, but it was also a time
Hmm.
when he was searching for producers.
Hmm.
It was something he wasn't quite used to. I mean, in the 70s, it was almost always him producing everything,
Hmm.
or with George Martin or Chris Thomas towards the end with Back to the Egg, and starting with the mid 80s, he was looking for current producers of that time who were doing
Hmm.
well that he admired. So
Yes.
I'm sure that was an entirely, new adventure for him,
Hmm.
instead of relying on what worked for him in the past. Going back to George
Yes.
Martin was the right move for Tug of War at the time. He
100%.
needed to make an album right after John died,
Yeah.
and to have him, Jeff Emerick there, have Ringo on, take it away,
Hmm.
Denny Lane still working with him. He needed the
Hmm.
comfort of his friends and people that he was close to. But
Hmm.
tell me overall the songs. I know you talked about three songs in a row that you thought were great with
Hmm.
Alligator, On My Way to Work, and Queenie Eye.
Queenie Eye.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What makes Queenie Eye work for you?
It's just such a wonderful production. Like everything's compressed, the sonics are superb, and he's really belting it on the vocals.
Hmm.
I mean, he's not. I mean, I would say the last time McCartney gave an outstanding vocal on a rocker was probably Fine Line, but this is a very commendable effort for a man in his early 70s. Obviously, McCartney in 1975 would have delivered a mightier vocal, but for a guy his age, he's really belting it out, and it's got great lyrics. Queenie, who's got and the dogs and bitches line. I mean, it's. I, I wonder if that was a dig at Heather Mills. I mean, if you look at the lyrics, dogs and bitches search for fame, and maybe there's a little bit of, or maybe, but it's just great production. The fact that it came out in when it did, and the fact that he was able to to compete with artists 30, 40 years younger than him and still deliver the goods was just fantastic. The only thing I don't like about Queenie Eye is the video. I think it's a bit indulged. It really is just facts of, oh, look at all my friends. I've got Meryl Streep over there and Johnny Depp over there. And I'm like, oh, come on. You don't need to do that. That's beneath you.
Well, he's used his friends like Johnny Depp several times, you know,
Hmm.
but I don't know. Um, Other songs that you think really stand out here? What's an interesting tune, at least for
Oh,
me, is Looking at Her. Looking at Her
yes.
sounds a lot to me like It's Not True. It's not true.
Ooh, I never made that.
What's that?
I never made that link myself.
Okay. Well, it's not true. I'm talking about the version that was the B side, not the one that they put on the CD that was far more produced with heavy drum sounds and everything. But
Hmm.
it's that way because Paul is singing the verses in a falsetto voice, a high pitched voice, and then when the
Hmm.
bridge or the chorus comes in, it's a heavier sound. There's this
Hmm.
battle between a lighter sound and then getting into something heavy.
Hmm.
Kind of like, in a way, it's funny we mentioned this, Queenie Eye. There's that one
Hmm.
moment in the song where it's jarring, where there's this, is it a middle eight, where all of a sudden the music stops and he's singing in a high pitched voice there. That's very unusual for the song to go right into that.
Yeah.
So, he does that once in a while. And I think looking at her reminds me of that. What did you think of looking at her?
Well, I'm looking at my piece now, and I say, listening to it now, looking at her sounds like a prototype for All Day, a piercing anthem heavy number McCartney would complete with Kanye West in 2015. Kanye West in recent years, his cachet is dimmed, and this was before I wrote this piece before Kanye became like the Bay Noir he is now. But they made some good stuff together All Day and 4 or 5 seconds. That was a good
Well,
partnership.
yep.
Although it was a bit much of Kanye to compare himself to John Lennon. Remember the last time someone brought
I don't know
guitar
if he really believes that.
to his work? I'm
Some
like, that's a
people,
bit unfair on Elvis Costello. Elvis just, yep,
what'd you say about Elvis Costello?
he brought some darkness out of McCartney on songs like I know you want her too. That's quite a dark number.
Uh-huh. That's true. Um, no, the first song that Paul did with Kanye, which was a ballad, um, Only One, is that what it was
Yeah.
called? That was pretty good. And I liked 4 or 5 seconds a lot, but I wish that we heard Paul's vocals, you know, just wasn't there on that.
Yeah.
But overall, I think this was a really strong album. The ones that stand out for you, we didn't talk about, I'm sorry for jumping in. Everybody out there.
Yes. I think that I think that Ringo could have covered that one as well. Everybody out there. It's fairly good. I think in my piece I say that it recalls early doo-wop Beatle numbers. It's fine. It's not my favorite track on the album, and if he'd given it to Ringo and not put it on the album, it wouldn't be a major loss. But
Hmm.
it's anyway. I'm sure it sounded great live.
I think of it as one of the catchiest songs on the album.
Hmm.
I did a show on my channel here, should have been singles. And even though you're reaching a time here in 2013 where no matter what Paul McCartney puts out, if he had
Yeah.
put out Ben on the Run in 2013, it wouldn't have been a hit because radio stations that play what are hit singles are gearing everything towards a younger demographic and they're not going to play a guy his age. I say that about
Hmm.
all the veterans, you know?
Hmm.
Um, but a song like Everybody Out There and I Can Bet are two songs that would have been hits in earlier times. Definitely.
Definitely,
They're so catchy and arresting. Couple of listens and
def
you're
definitely, I can bet if he'd released it around the time of Back to the Egg, I could imagine. I could definitely imagine Lawrence Juber playing the fiddly guitar parts on that.
hmm, yeah, there's a lot of great moments here. Um,
Hmm.
your favorite moments altogether would be, I mean, you
Those,
mentioned,
those three tracks are my favorite. I think that's like a classic, classic, classic. And then, yeah, those three. I mean, it's like three outstanding tracks in a row. Uh, but I also think Early Days is noteworthy. I mean, the lyrics are very good.
hmm,
Uh, Save Us is good, but I think a little overproduced. It sounded better live. I've seen clips of it live with Paul McCartney, his fingers going up and down the bass. I
yeah,
think there's a galloping energy to that wasn't there on the studio album, but that was all right. Uh, Hosanna is pretty good. He's got a good vocal there. Yeah, there's a lot. It's certainly a way of him saying, "I'm." If it's not the peak of his career at the 21st century. It's certainly a way of him saying, I can still do it. I think he was able to say, I'm still here. I can still write great tracks, and it's a, and lyrically, he's showing a side to himself that hadn't. And I think with this album, he was able to park his memories, put them in a box, because with Egypt Station, it's much more Egypt Station and McCartney 3. He's singing much more about his present life than he had been on the new album, which is more reflective with, say, Early Days and On My Way to Work and Queenie Eye.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, and I'm sure some people would disagree, the people who are big fans of Egypt Station and McCartney 3, I think New is the last great album from Paul.
Mm,
For me, anyway. But
yeah, yeah.
you know, and of this
Well,
century, certainly Chaos and Creation is way up there.
yeah, I agree. Well, I would say, yeah, New is. I would say I would put in, if you ask me to rank his finest work from the 21st century, Case and Creation is number one. I would say McCartney 3 is a second because it's a very, very interesting lockdown experience. And while it would dip a little bit, I would put New in third place because I think it is a very fine album. I think Memory Almost Full, which is seen by some as sort of like a McCartney Essence. I've never quite got that. There's a couple too many silly songs on Memory Almost Full for me. Like Vintage Clothes, I think is a very stupid track that doesn't go anywhere. Dance Tonight. I'm not keen on Dance Tonight. I mean, it had that charming video for Apple, but otherwise it's just a track melody. So if you ask me for if I had to go to a desert island with three albums from the 21st century, it would be Case and Creation, New, and McCartney 3.
Okay, good choices there. All right,
Mm-hmm.
you want to tell folks what you're up to? Any new projects on the horizon?
So I mentioned I was at Cannes, so you can check it at Dirty Movies, as you said. Don't worry, no, if you feel uncomfortable, you can just type in dmovies.org.
Uh-huh.
Everyone winces when they hear that title. Uh, you could also, I might, if it's all right, put in the box a link to the Blitz magazine. I recently did an interview with Fred Mandel, who was the keyboard player for Pink Floyd and Queen. So songs like Radio Gaga and I Want to Break Free, you can hear him play a lot of
Good
keyboards
songs.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I asked Fred Mandel if Brian May was upset that Mandel played the keyboard solo on Break Free, and he said Brian was a bit put out about it, but it was John Deacon's song, so a bit like in the Beatles, whoever song it was, they got to call the shots, and he said Brian got over it eventually.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
could you that interview with the keyboard player, is there a way you can send me a link for that so people can read it?
Yeah, yeah, I'll send it to you once we're finished, and if you could put it in the box, it's a physical
Absolutely.
magazine.
Okay.
Fantastic. And yeah, so yeah, and as I say, it was a tremendous honor to probably the honor of my life to contribute to this and to the John Lennon issue. And I will certainly read the George Harrison issue, whether I'm in it or not. I will certainly buy it. It's as a lifelong Beatle fan, it'll be fantastic. Uh, I'm just so thrilled that I got to play a part in both of these. I would have been insanely jealous if this magazine had come out and I wasn't part of it. So it was a wonderful. I know Dino Viscera also feels, and Emma Harrison also feels like it was such a thrill to be part of this magazine. Andy Nichols once said that in future generations they will study this magazine, and I think he might be onto something.
Hmm. I think it's the same thing with the John and Yoko one too. There's an
Mm-hmm.
outstanding
They were
job done with that one.
uh, uh, brilliant. Just I mean, every angle, every and very interesting pieces. I mean, what I loved about the John Yoko was all these intelligent, brilliant women writers writing about various facets of Yoko's career that show at me as a white man, I would never have figured out some of her lyrics, and reading some of these articles giving me an insight into what it's like to be a woman in the public eye of rock.
Right.
They're great intellectual experiences.
Yeah. Have you considered what you might want to contribute for the George Harrison issue? You being
Oh, I
the
can't
fan
talk.
you are of extra texture, I would think he'd want to write something about that.
We'll see what happens. We'll see. I mean, I haven't been if I'm in it or if I'm not, I'm going to read it anyway. I always assume that the last thing I've written is the last thing I've written and be grateful with that. If this is the last time I go to the Cannes Film Festival, that's how it is. If this is, we'll see how it goes. I mean, it was Daryl's suggestion that I do the Men Love Avenue, and that was a wonderful challenge. Wasn't an album that I might immediately have thought of, but it was just it, it opened my eyes to what I could write about that album.
Hmm.
And and when I worked with on the Genesis issue, I was asked to do the Invisible Touch album, so that gave me a reappraisal. It allowed me to praise Hugh Padgham in a way that I hadn't done in the past when I bashed him for some of his choices on Press to Play, and and the theme of that article was the Invisible Touch is Hugh Padgham. He's the one bringing out all these great sounds out of Genesis, and which is why it was such a commercial album. And so, like, I mean, it was a huge album in America, wasn't it?
Sure was.
Mm-hmm.
They were as big as
And
you could be. I mean, Genesis and Phil Collins solo.
mhm. And what I also a shout out to Dino Viscera. I thought his work in both magazines was fantastic. Just as a lifelong collector and fan, what he brought to the magazine.
Great. Have to have him back here on this channel. When it came
Indeed.
to the John and Yoko issue, Daryl suggested Menlove Avenue to you. Did you suggest New to Daryl from the,
Uh,
or did he ask you to do one on that one?
with the this one, there were there were a few suggestions, and the one that spoke to me was New. I was like, I know what to say for New, and he and I had a couple of chats about where we should go with the article. But I was Broad Street was an option, but I just didn't know what I would say about Broad Street. I mean, I think it was Ian Ward who wrote a piece, and he wrote an excellent piece. But I
Uh-huh.
didn't know what was I going to say about what was I going to say about Broad Street. But I knew what I wanted to say about New, all puns intended. So I mean, I was able to go, yeah, it's a reflective album, and basically I wrote the first paragraph and the second paragraph of the final paragraph, and then the rest just slotted into place.
Okay. Well, it's a really nice article, as are
Thank you.
all the articles in the McCartney issue and the
Mm-hmm.
Lennon issue. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
here you go, the McCartney one.
Yeah.
There's the
And Daryl
Lennon
also
one.
mentioned he mentioned on the show that he swapped chaos and creation and memory almost full, and I was like, hat tip to you for that. That was brilliant work. I thought that was just a
Well,
typo.
he said that because of he wanted to see if people would
Yes,
spot that.
because
But I was
I
wondering
thought
if the reason why he did that, I was thinking in my head was that he started working with David Kahn
mm-hmm,
before working with Nigel Godrich,
mm-hmm,
in what became Memory Almost Full. And then he went back to Memory Almost Full after Chaos and Creation. So maybe in terms
mm-hmm,
of recording,
yeah,
Memory Almost Full should be before Chaos.
that was
It
wonderful
would,
provocatoring from Daryl.
like saying Let It Be should be before Abbey Road.
No, no, Let It Be is the final album. I stand by that.
Well, we're just going by releases here. So then, you know, I don't know. Daryl did that on purpose, huh?
Yes. To work with Darrell Easley, like, he's a legend. I mean, his book on Peter Gabriel was superb. As he mentioned on our show, Jim Lee of Slate has asked him to work on his memoir. Jim Lee can get anyone he wants. So if he wants, so if he, the fact that he's asked Darrell Easley is says everything.
Hmm.
I
Well,
mean,
good for Daryl. I love
I,
having him
I
on the show alone and with you, and
mm-hmm,
continued success on these record collector magazines and in everything you do. And
well, thank you. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, they do. They had a very interesting piece on issue on Coldplay that that I and they had an issue on Oasis, and they seem to have. You name the band, they seem to have.
by the
Yeah.
way, I should mention if anyone's interested, if you don't have these issues or any other issues of Record Collector, you can always order back issues online.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's not like the McCartney issue came out in December of 2023 and you can't get it anymore. You can still get it at the John and Yoko issue.
Hmm. Yep.
So, Owen,
It's a yep.
go ahead.
No, no, just it's a wonderful magazine, and I'm eternally grateful that I was selected. That I was selected in 2021 to contribute to the Genesis issue, and it's been a great journey since.
And, they have such great writers all around. And I like reading
Hmm.
reviews. And
Hmm.
I don't mind if sometimes they're critical because all your writers have something valid to say. So
Hmm.
yeah. both worthy issues and a new one on George coming out the end of the year. So thank you so much, Owen, for being with us. And thanks to
Thank
all
you.
of you for watching. Please comment about this show and what you think about the new album as well.
Mhm.
And we'll see you soon. Take care.